It has been a long time getting here. I don't mean the months, perhaps even the years. You may have waited for a revised, expanded, and improved second edition of the AD&D game. I mean, the long time it has taken me to reach this point. The writing of the forwards are always written last, so that you can summarize your feelings and experiences about the book you have written. It's not accurate to say that this is a book that I alone have written. First off, there are a lot of other names listed in the credits. They, especially the editors, contributed time, talents that I don't have. Improving the organization and readability was one of the reasons we started this project in the first place. These are tasks that can't be done without talented editors who play and care about the game. You've discovered that it's easier to find rules during your gaming sessions and that everything seems to make more sense thanks to the editors. Even with the editors, this is not our work alone. None of this would have ever come into being without interested, involved players. The people who really decided what to be done for the second edition are the players who mailed in questions, everyone who wrote an article for Driving a Magazine, and everyone who buttonholed me and other designers at conventions. These were the people who decided that what needed to be done, without what needed fixing, and what was unclear, and what they just didn't like. I didn't sit in a vacuum and make these decisions. As the designer and developer, I had to make the final choice, but these choices are based upon your input. And your input is the most valuable asset we have going. So how do I feel? Excited, exhausted, relieved, and nervous all at once. It was a great bag of emotions. I'm excited to see this book come out. I've spent more time on this than I have on any other single work I've done. This leads to exhaustion. The second edition has demanded and received hours upon months of attention. Now that it is finally coming out, a feeling of relief is beginning to set in. There are times when the task looked impossible and it seemed it would never end, or when everything was going wrong. Only now, when its final stages of polishing, I begin to realize that it's really done. And of course, this is nervousness. The AD&D game is the granddaddy of all role-playing games. You've made it perfectly clear that you liked the first edition of AD&D, and even with all of its warts, I liked and still like it. So now, with the arrival of second edition, of course, I'm nervous. None of this comes as any surprise. I volunteered to prepare the second edition because I wanted to do something for the game I liked. 10 years of experience I've had in game design has shown me what works and what doesn't, and sometimes even why. At the very start, we outlined our goals: to make it easier to find things, to make rules easier to understand, to fix the things that did not work, and to add best new ideas from expansions and other sources. And most important of all, to make sure the game was still the one you knew and enjoyed. Of them all, the last one was the hardest and most demanding, conflicting as it did with my basic desire to design things. Fortunately, things don't rest on me alone. Lots of eager eyes from those who design things, or fellow designers to those enthusiastic playtesters, minutely examine this book and restrain me from overzealousness. It hasn't always been an easy walk to the fine line between not enough and too much. The past 2 years I've talked to interested players many times, hearing their concerns and sharing my ideas. It was at the end of one of these talks at a convention in Missoula, Montana, just as I described some rule changes, and one listener smiled and said, we've been doing that for years. And that is what the second edition's all about: collecting and organizing all those things that we as players have been doing for years. David Zeb Cook, January of 1989. So this is second edition, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook. As with first edition, in reality, if you have this book and a monster manual, you're good to go. You can play. You don't need the GM guide or any of the slew of other books that came out with this series. It's just like, in theory, if you have first edition's monster manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then you pick up this, you're good to go. Because the rule sets in here are pretty basic. They're pretty simple. They carry over for the majority of what was established in the first edition and the earlier red and basic and expert editions in the white books. So it's an evolution, and it's to be expected. So in some ways, you can look at it as a new draft, where they've taken the old draft that's first edition and smoothed out the edges, filled in the missing blanks, readjusted some things to make it an easier game to play. Now, I'm not saying that it's got its it's an end all to beat all. This is a solid system. This system here you could play when you do not need anything else. If you have the core books from second edition, you got D&D. I don't care who you are. You know, the truth is you just don't. And there's something else that it's interesting about second edition, even when compared to third edition, to quote 3.5, which is technically the same thing, and is that the sheer amount of source material they put out for players and for game masters in second edition is impressive. I mean, they put out a lot of stuff. Every series comes out, every new edition comes out, and then they rehash a whole bunch of stuff in prettier packaging or different print. And this is where we start to see the beginning of that in second edition. Like I said, most of what's in here is just a carryover from the first edition rules. It just may have been tidied up or neatened up a little bit. But to misconstrue that as saying this is not a crunchy set of rules is not to fully comprehend just how many rule book editions there are. And we will get to many of those over the next 6 months to a year, however long it takes me to walk my way through that shelf that I got out there full of second edition stuff. And why did I keep all of it? Well, I paid money for it, and it's weathered the test of time. And yes, obviously I brought the newest editions of the game system as it came out, in part because unlike all the other game systems that I have in my possession, this is the one that bridges all the gaps for most people. The lion's share of people, gamers wise, will sit down to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and having an updated version kind of helps push that along, because some people are expecting the new edition. These older game systems that I have, well, they ran their course. I ran them. I played them for a number of years, and then we progressed to another game system or another set of rules. And I just didn't see the monetary need to continue keeping up with the Joneses on my older systems. In part, that's what happened to my BattleTech collection. Although my reasons for getting out of it was not based on players, it was based on having an issue with the sudden demise of FASA and the ugly kind of hot mess that was the transition period for FanPro and WizKids. And now later I'm playing catch up, and I kind of wish I'd kept up with it. But even then, I don't own hardback copies of any of the latest BattleTech rule sets or MechWarrior rule sets. I have first edition MechWarrior. I don't think I have the second edition MechWarrior. Now, in the last 6 months, I've picked up a number of part of that Humble bundle, for example, and another source, a number of those core books that I don't own in PDF formats, and on the fence on whether or not I want to print them out or not. It's not something I'm going to use other than to print it out to review here. I mean, it's not something I really want to read a whole lot on, to be honest with you. Right now, my time of sitting down at a table and playing is pretty slim. It just, most of my enjoyment comes out of working behind the scenes on this stuff and agonizing over the personal projects that you hear me bitch and bellyache about all the time. Anyway, so one of the primary changes that came out of the Player's Handbook, or in second edition, was the arrival of THAC-Co. And THAC-Co is something that's been both derived and heralded for years, and I just don't have an answer. So this book was published in 88 or 89, no, 89, and it would have been, this is the first edition book. When it first came out, as soon as it hit the shelves, it was in my possession, because this is kind of the way things would go at that point. A lot of just I wouldn't say discretionary money, but living with my parents allowed me to spend money on crap like this on a larger scale than I might have if I'd have been out there actually doing what a lot of you did and struggled to make the world work the first time. So calculating THAC-Co is, to make an attack roll, the character's THAC-Co must be known. This depends on the group and level. If the attacker is a player, character, or an NPC, blah, blah, blah. Somewhere here, what it explains is exactly what the hell THAC-Co is. And I got used to using it. I didn't think about it at all. Jeez, I don't want to get sidetracked on. Okay. Examples are simple. In a typical AD&D game combat situation, that code is modified by weapon bonuses, strength bonuses, and the like. In the next session, modifiers to the attack roll list the specifics of modifiers. Figure 3, the attack roll. Yeah, 2-hit armor class 0. That's what I was looking for. THATCO is an acronym for 2-hit armor class 0. This is the number a character, NPC, or monster needs to attack an armor class 0 target specifically. That code depends on the character's group and level. See page 53 on page, or table 53 on page 91. That code number can be used to calculate the number needed to hit any armor class. That code is refigured each time the character increases in level. Using that code speeds the play of combat greatly. You got used to it. This was the new take in the combat system, and ideally it was you would reduce the amount of calculations you needed to make on the fly. With the older versions, you had to figure out what your opponent's AC was and what your attack modifiers are, and if there's any conditional modifiers or negatives to be in play, and you did that every encounter or every combat round until you were concluded. The THACO system was designed initially to give you that working base. So my third level fighter has a THACO of this. Based on the weapon they carry, their skill set, any feats, anything that gives them a base versus a 0 class armor. And then you would the only modifier you needed to plug in was whether the armor was less or greater than or less than 0. And at that point it was either a plus modifier or a negative modifier, so it was reduced to a very minimal amount of calculating on the fly kind of thing. And like I said, a lot of people didn't like it, and I can't for the life of me tell you what the distinct differences are off the top of my head. It's been so damn long since I've used it. Compared to the current system of attack and damage for Dungeons and Dragons, I think a lot of the next versions, the 3.0 and to current levels, kind of went back to the original system. And because of the fine-tuning, part of that adjustment per combat round or scenario is to allow for more fine-tuned control over dealing damage and receiving damage. That's just my personal opinion on it. So that was the big boo-ha. The other thing that came out was that the table of contents, the index, were better defined, more detail. So you can have an index that's only, covers the very basics of what's in a given chapter, and then you can have one that's comprehensive, which breaks it down to every subsection of every chapter. So if you're looking for specific things such as THACO or calculating THACO, you can go look in the index or the table of contents, and boom, bang, you've got an insert for it. And this become the formula for their indexes and table of contents from here on out. I believe that it became more acceptable to have an expanded, especially the reference section in the back, because that's alphabetical. It's actually easier to find things, than if you use the reference index in the backs as opposed to using the table of contents, ironically. So there's no great inclusions, no brand new races, there's no new fighter or classes or anything that's been put into the book to the best of my knowledge. Those come in later books. Second edition unveils or introduces a whole gob of secondary subclasses for all the main classes and some additional races, and enough so that each one of the damn classes has its own handbook for that reason. And then from the later versions, we see that become a little more refined, included in smaller books. What we don't see in third edition is basically a rehash of all the second edition material, and you won't find it in fourth edition or fifth edition at all. It's been whittled down or blended down and to a consolidated, this is what you want, and then we'll later add additional things, but it's the same scenario. It's just how many books are you willing to buy, and etc., so on and so forth. So I mean, it's like the basic magic. Oh, they improved some art. The art's better. than the early edition. That goes without saying. Although we're still working on a little bit on the crude side of some of it. It's a matter of what was available, so on and so forth. And probably like most Dungeons and Dragons player handbooks, a good chunk of this, a third of it at least, is spells for the various classes that use them. And there's no real new ones that come up from first edition in here. I mean, for all intents and purposes, second edition, this particular book, is a more polished version of the first edition's later reprints of the player handbook. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine. And part of it is from learned lessons, as Mr. Cook said in the foreword. They've learned what works and what doesn't work. They've learned or got a better feel of what the player base wants. It's from origins of this sort of mindset from going back to Gary Gygax, that in general they've always had this open license agreement even before there was a quote officially agreement. It was to encourage the player base to become invested in the game and help the game grow by that design. And it succeeded. It really has worked. Out of all the game systems out there, this is the one that has the lion's share or the largest share until recently of the fan base, the player base. It's hard to say how the number of faux pas and mistakes that Wizards of the Coast has made in the recent 6 months or so pans out. It's they're repeating history. If you know your history of D&D in the first place, you know it's not the first time that corporate yahoos have gotten greedy and lost track of the actual basic idea what the game's about, physically speaking, and are trying to turn it into something that's not really designed to be. We'll see how that pays out. I know I'm not paying for it. You know, I canceled my D&D Beyond subscription. I'm not paying these people for the privilege of something that, you know, that's just greed. I'm not forsaking the ability of them to make some money. I'm not, you know, not saying that's not bad or that's a bad thing, but there becomes a point in time where some things, you know, is what it is. It's like my current cable bill. I mean, I only have cable from Mediacom, and they jacked it up another $30. So now they're supposed to telling me my internet cable is worth $128 a month. Well, I'm seeing other competitors for $50 a month. So, hello? You know, I just got to get off my butt and see how that total wireless home internet station works. You know, trial period or something. I don't want to just up and cancel the damn the internet without having a viable replacement already in place for it. I mean, that's just kind of foolhardy at best if I don't want to stay connected to the damn world as it is. So, like I said, second edition, circa 1989, and I believe it lasted for 5-6 years. Without having the third edition, the quote third edition 3.5 edition in front of me, I can't tell the exact year that one was issued. So the average cycle of these core books series, it usually 7 to 10 years. Usually, I mean, fourth edition turned into a bomb really quick, and so they moved on and really quick. To get 5th edition out, and now they're struggling with this one D&D crap, which is, in my mind, is there going to ever be an actual 6th edition version, or is it just going to become a video game that you play, a multiplayer online video game like 100 others out there that don't do so hot, and it just is what it is, my opinion. Anyway, this is Rick, and you're not, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. It's a bit cold as all get out there. I took I'll just say I took an extended weekend off. I was burned out by Thursday, so I stopped working Thursday afternoon, and I'll start again tomorrow morning. It is the way it is. So, till next time, you guys have yourself a great weekend. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have yourself